Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's AGM, well, Munch and AGM from the Data Management Specialist Group. Similar to last year, what we're doing is running this over lunchtime just to give people a chance to have a quick dip in, find out what's been going on, and sort of discuss and collaborate as we go. Just as a bit of housekeeping, if you can keep yourselves on mute unless you specifically want to speak about something, then that'll be great. Also, if you want to communicate, by all means use the chat, and then either Glenn or myself can pick up the chat and we can respond appropriately. So Glenn's helping run the AGM with me today. So, as usual, for those of you who may have attended one of our physical AGMs in the past, what I tend to do is keep them informal, keep them quick, because nobody's that passionate about AGMs, really, are they? So keep it fairly quick and informal, and sort of get through the topics fairly quickly, which then gives, in the case of our physical events, you to give us a chance to get people to have a speaker, so they have plenty of time with a speaker. Today, what we're going to be doing is actually just opening it up to get a bit of feedback from yourselves about what we've been doing, what you might want in the future. So yes, it's very informal. By all means, do chip in with comments or suggestions or anything if you want as you go through. So purpose of an AGM is to be reviewing what you've done in the year, discuss issues, vote on committees for next year, and then look at things going forward. So at the moment, the review of the year is very much what we've got up on the screen at the moment. So we've got, we actually had quite a busy year. We did a number of events, even including, if we took the conference that we had in June out of the picture, we still managed to run 7 events throughout the year. We're currently in webinar mode only. And I think for specialist groups to get accessibility to the widest number of people, both geographically and if people might have any movement restrictions or anything else like that, I think it's using webinars is actually quite a useful way of doing that. So we had a number of really good speakers over the year. All the recordings of the events are up on the BCS member groups channel on YouTube, and there's a specific playlist for the Data Management Specialist Group. So beginning of March last year, or middle of March last year, we had Keith Strahan, who was giving a presentation just before he retired from NHS social care. And it was about data in health and social care, which is a very interesting, very engaging presentation. We had Lester Thomas, who's Chief Technology Officer for Vodafone, talking about what will 5G ever do for me. Doug Silverstone from Metropolitan Thames Valley Housing, he got a lot of experience around data management. And he was looking at, in the physical world, how do we make buildings safer in the post-Grenfell world. Middle of May, we had a two-hander presentation from Tim King, who is the ISO 8000 convener, and John Alvis, who at that time was with the Nursing and Midwifery Council, talking about ISO 8000, but in particular about how you can use data quality to help deliver benefits for whatever organisation you're in. With Dharma UK, we followed the pattern of last year where we ran our normal joint event as a virtual conference, and we learned a bit from last year's, but we basically followed a similar kind of format to last year, where we had 2 webinars a day all throughout a single week. So that was the 14th, the 18th of June, and we ended on a panel debate. So we actually had, this year, we got 9 presentations. All of them were excellent. They were really good speakers, really good presentations, triggering quite a bit of good debate. And also, as a new venture this time around, we engaged a company called Journalism, who in effect created a live visual representation of the webinars that we've just done. And that was really interesting, both to see what they created and also to then have that lasting record for the future. We carried on our series of lunchtime webinars where we're getting PhD researchers to explain a bit about some of the research work they're doing. So we had the first of 2 presentations from Birmingham City University. So Amna Dridi was looking at techniques to look at how to detect emerging research trends. And then later on in September, we had Zach Sanusi looking at histopathology images and using deep learning on how you break down complex X-rays and imaging to actually start doing some automated diagnoses, which both of those were really interesting. Maybe slightly straying slightly outside of pure data management, but were both very interesting in terms of what they were doing. And the other presentation that we did was we had a panel debate on ethics and AI. Dan Cope, one of our vice chairs, we've got two vice chairs. He led that debate with Beth Singler, Maria Luciano Athente, and Neil Lawrence, and it was quite a good, lively, engaging debate about ethics and AI. So we've actually had quite a busy year in terms of events, and I think partly it was made possible by the fact that webinars makes it a little bit easier for running those events without having to do lots of traveling. But I think, as Glenn will agree, when you're running a virtual conference, the logistics and the effort trying to keep on top of all those presentations can actually be quite interesting and challenging. We did actually share the chairing of that session with Dharma UK, so we alternated who was doing what. If I just realised I've not gone through. So we had, for that virtual conference, we took the BCS strapline of making IT good for society and said, well, why not look at making data better for society? So we looked at a variety of different use cases, different presentations about how people had helped use data to make a difference. We'd got Phil Earle looking at the National Data Strategy and what they're needing to do about implementing that. We've got Dudley Group NHS Foundation Trust with Neil Crump. And then the Open Data Institute was represented by Millie Zamita. Mapping got a play with Carly Redhead and Sam Colchester from the Humanitarian OpenStreetMap team. And then Karen Alford came back and gave us another update in terms of some of the work she's been doing at the Environment Agency. I had a very good and engaging conversation with Mark Enzer, who is both representing the Centre for Digital Built Britain and Mark MacDonald about data for the public good, which fits in the overall stream of the conference, and the National Digital Twin. I can see that Matthew is online at the moment. He's also involved in that work. Data ethics was covered by Catherine O'Keefe, who with Dara O'Brien at Castlebridge there, so in Ireland, are sort of well known for their insights into the world of ethics and data protection. Stuart Gitney from the National Physical Laboratory looked at measurement and metrology. And then Nick Soros from DataKind looked at using data science for the social sector, and it was people donating some of their time to address particular challenges and projects. So it was a good mix of presentations we've had throughout the year. I mentioned that we had Journalism doing a visual record of those events for the conference. And here's an example of the two from the panel debate, where in effect, he'd got the four people in the panel, myself and Mark Humphreys as the hosts, and put in some quite good ideas in terms of the topics that we covered and did it all in a visual thing. Now, unlike the presentations where there was a rough idea of what was going to come up, in this case, the team were doing the sketching were relatively unprepared for what we were likely to talk about. So the fact that they're able to do this live and then show us whilst we're doing the panel debate was actually quite an impressive piece of work. So certainly recommend using them in the future. For reference, if you're a BCS member and you log in and go onto the DMSG pages on the BCS website, there is a link there where you can get access to all 20 of the outputs that were produced during the week. And there's also a short video as well, which kind of merged in the different aspects for each of them. But that was an experiment for us. That was actually, it was recommended by Dharma, and it was actually a very good, I think, a very positive and worthwhile way of doing things. A couple of other things that we did. For a while now, I've been a bit frustrated that we've not been able to get anything, or not tried and not succeeded in getting anything into IT Now, which is the magazine for BCS. So Ed Evans did a bit of work taking a presentation that was done last year by Gavin Stark on open energy. And so he turned that into an article which came out in IT Now just recently. And there's an article forthcoming, and I think it'll be coming in the next edition of IT Now, which is looking at the panel debate that we did for the Making Data Good for Society virtual conference. So in effect, in the year, we'll have got 2 articles in there. And on the back of that, I'm hoping that we can actually get a few more articles posted at some point in the future. So that is just a quick roundup of some of what we've been doing. Clearly, for many people, like many people, we've been working in a slightly different way than we have done. I think big successes, we've carried on the virtual working. I think that has worked very well. We've managed to collaborate very well as a committee. The virtual conference in June, I think, was a huge success. The fact that we got not just 9 presentations and the panel debate, but also the quality of the presentations, I thought was extremely good. The feedback we got was very good, and the attendance levels were very good. So all in all, I think that was a very good, good activity that we did. And I must admit, compared to some of the events where people are running ever longer virtual conferences as single sessions, the worst one I came across was the Master Data Management Marathon, where they did 23.6 hours continuous of webinars. That was a bit of a slog, I think, to get through for everybody, and I'm not sure that's the right way to do it. Yes, it sounds good for your CV and your ego, but maybe not as easy as people want. Also, we've had a reasonably active committee this year. Work has made things difficult for some people as things have gone up and down throughout the year, but particularly with Glenn helping at the controls, making sure that all these webinars and virtual events run effectively. I think that's helped make the committee work well over the year. So those are some of the successes. Plans for the next year. So this AGM webinar we're having at the moment, the intention is that we open it up and we have a bit of a discussion at the end. So at the moment, we are planning to continue running webinars for the foreseeable future and repeat the virtual conference, but actually want to get a bit of feedback from yourselves going into the future, what your thoughts are in terms of formats of events, speakers, topics of interest, things of that nature. So we're keen to get some much more feedback from you to make sure that we're doing making sure that we're tuning our events to meet what people actually want. When we get back to physical events, I think we'll probably try some more of the in conversation with type events, which do seem to work quite well as being very different to the standard sort of PowerPoint slide show that some people will give. It's actually a little bit more engaging, just a different field. So we're going to try a few more of those. We can get the right experts in that. Clearly, COVID-19 has continued to be a bit of a challenge. I think the committee, whilst we've been reasonably active, trying to keep people engaged, trying to, for people juggling both their personal lives and also working lives, has made things a little bit challenging at times. I think one of the things we have found difficult, particularly in this autumn period, has been just the sheer number of webinars and virtual events that are being run by ourselves, by the other BCS organisations, Dharma, everybody else. Everybody's doing virtual events. So trying to get electronic attendance at these events is proving a little bit more interesting. I think we've not done badly, but I think it does make it a little bit harder to make sure we get enough people there at each of our events. So those are some of the challenges we're dealing with. And I think I would see that for the foreseeable future, certainly the next 6 months, we're going to be in a very similar situation. So from me, firstly, I'd like to thank the committee. We've got Glenn helping at the controls here today. We've also got Jagdev and Terry online at the moment, but also from Dan, Lisa, Soyini, and I don't know who else. We've got somebody else on the committee. But anyway, all the committee have been really useful having your input. Ed, that was it. Appreciated the input they've had throughout the year. Also, as usual, the BCS team in Swindon, and Mandy, you may have seen her very briefly at the start where she was helping get things set up. She's proved very useful mainstay to make sure the admin gets done correctly. But also thank you to the likes of yourselves for coming along to some of these webinars, participating and giving us a bit of engagement, which is always useful when we actually make sure we get through to people. So that's good. So thank you for that. Terry, I think, is online. I'm not sure if Terry is able to speak, Terry. I mean, I think basically our financial report this year is very sketchy. Basically, we had no expenditure. We raised no money. The only expenditure we did have was the funding for journalism at the virtual conference, and that was jointly funded between Dharma and BCS. But actually, because it was outside of what we put in as our budget and was a bit larger than our budget, we put in a special funding request to the finance committee who reviewed our request and approved it, and so that was in effect the only expenditure throughout the year. So any questions really in terms of the chair's report or the treasurer's bit of it? Terry, I don't know if you want to add any comments. Appreciate you're in another meeting at the same time. Terry is double handling things as usual. Any comments from anybody else? No, I'll take that as read that people are happy with what's going on. That's good. So at the moment, the committee, as we stand at the moment, Terry's giving us a little wave so we can see visual Terry. Terry, I don't know if any quick comments from you about the treasurer's bit. Oops. You're on mute, Terry. Terry, you're on mute.
Right, can you hear me?
That's better, yes, we can indeed.
Fiddling with the knobs. No, you put the position very well, thank you. I rushed back from the project managers meeting to get to this one. And it's been well worth attending. I'd like to thank Julian for all his hard work. He's really kept the group going.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. Yes, it's been a labour of love sometimes, but I think it is important that data is represented correctly. So that's good. So thank you, Terry. Right. So in terms of the committee, the proposal is that very similar to last year, what we'd like to propose to do is do a quick show of hands and see whether people are happy with voting en bloc for the committee rather than doing a vote for each one, and then secondly, by the way, sorry, if you're not a BCS member, please don't vote. You can listen in, that's fine, but please don't vote. But basically, we're proposing no change to committee. So the roles, myself continuing as chair, Dan and Lisa as joint vice chairs, Glenn carrying on as event secretary, Terry as treasurer, Ed as communications, Jagdev doing academic liaison and is our diversities and inclusion officer. And then Soyini Taylor is also on the committee as a member without portfolio. So, and also, sorry, volunteers welcome. So that's just a quick reminder. If you feel like you want to find out more about how we run, and there is a question from Ashish there about opportunities to get involved. We are fairly relaxed about the approach. I'd rather have people come along, have a little look and see how do we do things, and they can volunteer for the committee. They can come along, and if they want to get involved helping run events, that's great. And then typically the way we kind of work people in is they might attend a few committee meetings, then say at the next AGM, actually, I'd like to formally stand on the committee. And then maybe the year after that, they might then say, actually, I feel like I want to be the treasurer or the secretary or whatever. So we gradually bed people in. And the other thing that we do is that we've all got day jobs, we've all got family lives. So we try and make sure that we balance the effort needed to run the DMSG with the time that people have got available to put into it. So we sometimes put in an overall program for the year, and then as things get a bit closer to it, we might pull some of the events because we can't get through there. Quick reminder from Glenn in the background there. So if you are interested in getting involved in the committee, by all means, either use the chat or probably more appropriate, if you send an email to me. I think if you're a BCS member, you should have had emails coming through from me on a regular basis, both about the AGM and about other events. So by all means, respond to one of those emails and we can have a little chat about that. So in terms of the committee for next year, so using the functionality in Zoom, if you can use the raise hand functionality, firstly, if you're happy to show your sort of views, firstly, we want to just check, are you happy to vote for the committee en bloc as sort of en masse as one vote? So if you can stick your hand up for that. So we've got various hands going up on that. Any abstentions? So if you put your hands down there, if you voted, any abstentions? And any against? Okay, so people are comfortable with that. So then the vote then is, if people are happy with the proposed committee, if you approve of the proposed committee, if you can just use raise hands at the moment.
Lost my raise hands box.
Mm. Thank you. I think we seem to have a number of hands raised there, which is good. So, okay, if you lower your hands now, and then if there's anybody abstaining and any against. No, thank you. That's good. So thank you for that. That means we've got a clear view for the committee going forward. So thank you for that. So we're about pretty much at the end of the formal bit here, which is then just a quick plug for our next event, which is on the 24th of November. We're going to have a panel debate about careers in data. So at the moment, the panel is proposed as Glenn and myself, representing people who've got a little bit more experience in the world of data, but also Soyini Taylor, Priscilla Omanido, and potentially Jagdev Bogal, representing sort of different ends of the spectrum. So we're going to have a broad committee there, a broad panel there, just to talk about data and careers in data. That's good. So anybody got any points they'd like to raise, just as any other business from the AGM, before we get into our discussion about events? Okay. So really, questions we've got. So we're actually a relatively small group, so by all means come off mute and let us know what you think. But really what we're interested in is, what topics would you be interested in the future? Are there particular speakers or types of speakers? So even if you don't know the name of an individual, areas that you think might be useful. And also one thing that we are very keen to get a view of is what your preference is about webinars, physical events, or running hybrid events. So you actually have the speaker potentially in the room with a small audience, and it is then broadcast to the wider world. So thoughts on both of those two question areas, really. So either use chat, or if you want to come on off mute, and you can then just let us know what you think. Anybody got any particular topics, any particular case studies they think are wonderful and would like to share with people? Do people have many of you attended any of our lunchtime sessions where we've had some of the PhD researchers explaining their research? So again, do you like those? Do you want more? See, Matthew's come off mute. So Matthew, hello.
Well, I was wanting to make just a couple of general points, really, which is that personally, I really appreciate that the meetings this last year have been virtual, because it's historically been a struggle for me to attend for various reasons. And it's still difficult to attend, depending on timing and so on. So the fact that the sessions are sort of published so that you can watch them offline is something that I particularly appreciate. So that I can pick the time when I'm looking at them. And I'm not going to claim I've looked at all of them, but it's been very good to be able to do that. Equally, anytime you want, anytime when I'm actually available, if you want something a bit more technical about the National Digital Twin Programme, I'm always happy to talk about that.
Yeah, well, I think that probably is where I think that will be a very useful topic to have a subject, a webinar at some point in the future. I think it's probably one where it's probably down to working with you to work out what's the best time to do that. So either when you've got a milestone, you publish something, you think, and you now want the world to take note, or you're trying to get consultations and responses to something. So I think if you know you've got something coming up, by all means, get in contact and get something set up on that. That'll be good. Anybody online who is either working in a university or knows people who are doing research who might have some interesting research that may be a suitable webinar for us? No, not to worry. Any other views about events? I mean, in terms of hybrid events, what are your thoughts about whether we'd maybe do a few hybrid events or physical events, maybe 6 months from now, starting to get into physical events? Any particular views either way? You're all very quiet.
Well, I'll speak again just in case. I'm actually quite happy with virtual events. I think it's actually a very good way to do this kind of thing. I suspect that meeting physically is fine for people who were nearby physically in the first place, but that's just not generally the case.
Yeah.
You know, we're spread all over the country, at least, and maybe in multiple countries.
Yeah, indeed. So we actually have had a number of attendees at our webinars. There's one gentleman from Nigeria who was a very regular attendee, and I believe that there are now growing numbers of BCS members in Nigeria. So it's a good way of being able to reach out to them. Also, just in the UK, sometimes if you're somebody's in Aberdeen or wherever, the idea of a meeting in London just for an hour to have a speaker about something, they're not necessarily going to go through there. And obviously, I've seen Ashish is based in Canada. So again, that shows we're actually, our reach is fairly broad there, which is good. So I think certainly I can see that being continuing in the future to a greater or lesser degree. And it's a bit more...
I think the question would be, and I appreciate the hybrid is you know, where you have maybe the speaker, or maybe even not the speaker, but some of the people meeting in person. I mean, that's clearly not a problem. I would be interested in whether there was actually a significant demand for that.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's one of the reasons for posing the question. So I have seen a recording of one where the physical side of the meeting were two of the committee members who were running the event. The speakers were virtual, the audience was all virtual. So it was a strange.
That's really virtual then, isn't it?
really virtual, yes. So they tried to do it. They would, I think,
yeah.
Anything, they were testing technology. That's good. Okay. Any more thoughts on topics that people might want to be getting presentations on?
Yeah, can I make a suggestion?
Yep, go ahead, Paul.
The rumoured reforms to GDPR as affects data.
Yep.
Secondly, data sovereignty. My view, the bias is wrong in the data and sovereignty regulations as it stand, because the bias is weighted towards the location of the person accessing the data as opposed to the physical location where the data is stored.
Mm-hmm.
I think that needs significant reform. And then other things I would suggest in terms of information governance and all of the flaws that everyone's aware of in relation to things like two-factor and things like that. And critically, the final point I would make is I was at the events with DCMS and the people from the ICO when GDPR was introduced back at Southampton Street, showing my age.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we have a new incumbent chair coming in from Australia with regard to the ICO. Yep. I think it's overdue for the ICO to represent at Copthall Avenue. I would defer to the previous gentleman's point regarding hybrid meetings, but the ICO need to come back in, as indeed do DCMS, in my view, particularly if they are going to go after the social media companies, particularly Facebook's their #1 target, as I'm sure you know, regarding to the new online harms bill. So these are all critical areas of interest to myself, and answer to your question, sir.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Paul. We'll take that on board and we'll see if we can build some of that into the programme for next year. Any other particular topics or subject areas that people have got a particular interest in, or either there's a burning question they're trying to get answered, a challenge they're trying to address, or an area where they think that we've potentially been not putting in as much coverage as they may have liked over the previous year or so?
Can I add one more quick thing in?
Go on, Paul.
Horizon. The BCS didn't do it anywhere near enough in lieu of Horizon, and also the way that the Home Office is involved, given the fact that some of their technology is rumoured to be 40 years out of date, including magnetic tape.
Yeah.
BCS should have done one hell of a lot more in relation to Horizon and didn't, and it was a critical failure. And I told very senior people in charge that to their face.
Yeah, no, I think I'd agree with that. I think sometimes with the policy team and with the different specialist groups, sometimes it's difficult to find exactly where something lands unless somebody has a particular passion for something. And I think when something gets a little bit more maybe controversial, sometimes people may recognize there is a need to cover it, but actually it's, well, who covers it? And so, yeah, that's a good question. There, just as an aside, there is some work so I'm also on the communications working group within the BCS. We're looking at how the communication goes between member groups and members, and between members themselves. and there is some work ongoing at the moment. And in the autumn, there will be a BCS implementation of discourse being set up that will allow better communication and collaboration between BCS members, but also it will be a bit more dynamic getting across to people like the policy team. So if there is a question from the centre about which groups do we need to consult to handle this particular issue, I think that should make things a little bit easier for people. And it will also mean that particularly people who've got a particular interest in a particular area, or if you're on a committee, you've got better ways of collaborating. Sorry, Matthew, you got your hand up again.
Yeah, I just wanted to reinforce what was being said about the Horizon issue. I mean, it's as disgraceful as Grenfell Tower, which has had rather more publicity and affected, probably not killed anyone, but it certainly affected very detrimentally a large number of lives.
Yeah.
I think there's I think one of the things that BCS needs to have, so I appreciate it's not just us, is some kind of disaster response capability, because it was a disaster. Well, it still is to some extent, in as much that it's not satisfactorily resolved still.
Yeah.
And that would clearly need to have a broad range of skills and knowledge, which would include us, but certainly not be limited to us.
Yeah, I think the Horizon one, there's a lot on the ethical side as well, which is partly, again, it's partly in our sphere, but also it's part of that wider question around ethics. When you read some of the more legal descriptions of how the case went through, and it's eye-opening. So yes, very good suggestion, Paul and Matthew. So useful for that one. Just realised we're just running slightly over 1 o'clock now, and I think we've probably all got may well all have other meetings to go to. I certainly have one myself. So any last comments in terms of topics that people are interested in? By all means, I think Glenn has put my email address in the chat. And also I'll have sent emails out to people reminding them of forthcoming events. So by all means, if you think of something in the bath tonight or whilst you're going out for a jog, by all means, send me an email and we can pick it up from there. Similarly, if you feel like you want to find out a little bit more about what it's like to be on the committee and whether you've got the right kind of skills and what it involves, again, just reach out in terms of the using an email there. So that's a good way of doing that. So I think that probably will wrap it up there, because we're just over 1 o'clock and I don't want these things to go on too long, because I'll get told off for being a little bit too lengthy. But once again, let's thank you all for attending. Thank this year's committee both for their support during this year, but also for agreeing to carry on for next year, which is much appreciated. So thank you one and all, and we hope to see you again at other events in the near future. Thank you.